The hearing room was thick with tension. Speaker Mike Johnson strode through the double doors, his American flag pin gleaming against a charcoal suit. That familiar pastoral smile was already fixed in place. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been truly challenged inside his own house. Across the table, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still. Her deep purple blazer, sharp under the lights, was the color of royalty and of bruises. 3 manila folders lay neatly before her, lined up like ammunition. Johnson wasted no time on courtesy. "Mr. Chairman," he began, his Louisiana drawl coating every word with honey, "I want to address something that's been bothering me and many Americans for some time now." He let his gaze sweep the room before landing squarely on Crockett. "We're seeing a troubling trend in this Congress. Some members seem to think viral videos equal actual qualifications." A deliberate pause. "Representative, Crockett talks a lot about defending constitutional rights. But when you look at her actual record, what is it? 2 years in the Texas legislature." His smile tightened. "You have to wonder, is she really qualified for the Oversight Committee? Or is this about checking boxes and meeting quotas?" The implication hung in the air like smoke. "Maybe," he continued, "instead of performing for TikTok, some of our younger members should spend a little more time learning how Congress actually works. Show some respect for the institution, some humility about what they don't yet know." The room went dead still. Even a few Republicans shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had heard the DEI undertone. Crockett's pen stopped mid-line. She looked up slowly, that small, knowing smile playing at her lips, the one that used to make opposing counsel in Texas courtrooms uneasy. "Mr. Speaker," she said, voice smooth as silk over steel, "I appreciate your concerns about qualifications." The pause before concerns was surgical. "When it's my turn, I'll be happy to address them." Another pause. "All of them." Johnson's smile flickered, just for a second, but the cameras caught it. Chairman James Comer cleared his throat. "The chair recognizes the gentle lady from Texas." Jasmine rose deliberately, smoothing her blazer with one hand, a gesture that looked both professional and like a boxer adjusting gloves before the bell. The overhead lights caught her perfectly as she drew the first folder closer. The whisper of paper sliding over wood sounded louder than it should have in the silence. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." She opened the folder with the care of someone presenting evidence, which, of course, she was. "The speaker raised some interesting questions about qualifications," she said, her voice measured, calm. "About experience, about a proven record of service." Her eyes locked on Johnson's. He kept smiling, but his hands had tightened around the edge of his desk. "Let's discuss qualifications," she said softly. The gentleness made the words hit harder. Chill rippled through the Republican side of the room. She drew out the first document and placed it on the table like a card in a high-stakes game. "Rhodes College," she said. Another paper followed. Bachelor of Arts, Business Administration, graduated 2003. Her rhythm was hypnotic. Phones lifted around the room, recording. University of Houston Law Center, she continued. Juris Doctor, graduated 2006. A beat. Licensed to practice law in... She paused for effect. Document poised in hand. Texas, Arkansas, and multiple federal courts. From the gallery, a young black woman in a Howard Law hoodie whispered, "Yes," under her breath. Public defender, Bowie County, Texas. Jasmine went on. Tone shifting, professional polish giving way to something personal. Something that bled conviction. 5,347 cases, she said evenly. Then she looked directly at Johnson. Defended, Mr. Speaker. Not prosecuted. Defended. I defended people this system wanted to throw away. Children who made mistakes. The poor who couldn't afford lawyers like the ones you've worked with. People whose constitutional rights were being trampled. The words hit like a current through the room. 400 peaceful protesters during the summer of 2020, she continued, counting deliberately on her fingers. Each one pro bono. While they fought for justice in the streets, I fought for their constitutional rights in court, for free. The soft thump of the folder closing echoed through the microphones. Amplified, definitive. Freshman of the year, she said. Another finger raised. Not one organization, 3 different organizations recognized my first term in the Texas legislature. Another finger. Named to the Route 100 Most Influential African Americans of 2021 for my work protecting voting rights. Her smile sharpened. Filed more bills than any other freshman legislator in Texas history. I built a coalition to pass landmark criminal justice reforms. And when Republicans tried to suppress voting rights, I helped organize 62 Democratic legislators to walk out and deny a quorum. She leaned forward, presence radiating command. We stayed out for 38 days. The silence that followed was absolute. So yes, Mr. Speaker, she said finally, I am extremely qualified for this committee. For this institution, for any position I hold. Then, with lethal calm, now let's discuss your qualifications. The air shifted. Marjorie Taylor Greene, seated 3 chairs down from Johnson, looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Even a few Republicans leaned forward now, curiosity winning over loyalty. Jasmine pulled the second folder toward her. It was thicker than the first, the stack of papers threatening to spill out. You mentioned experience and proven records of service, she said, opening it carefully. I couldn't agree more. So, let's examine yours. She held up a page for the cameras. Mike Johnson, Alliance Defending Freedom, Senior Legal Counsel and Spokesperson, 2002 to 2010. 8 years. She set the paper down and lifted another, the logo unmistakable. The Alliance Defending Freedom, currently designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as, she paused, reading with clinical precision, a hate group with a documented history of supporting the recriminalization of private sexual activity between consenting adults, opposing LGBTQ civil rights, and seeking to make marriage equality illegal again. Johnson's face flushed crimson. The SPLC is a partisan. I'm not finished. Mr. Speaker. Her tone sliced through the interruption like a scalpel. You'll have plenty of time to respond. I'm just getting started. That phrase, just getting started, sent a visible shudder through the Republican side. She lifted another document, drenched in yellow highlighter. In 2003, you wrote, and I'm quoting directly, there is clearly no right to sodomy in the Constitution. She looked up. That was your legal argument against Lawrence v. Texas, the Supreme Court case that struck down laws criminalizing private sexual conduct between consenting adults. Another document. Another blow. In 2004, you wrote in the Shreveport Times that homosexual relationships are inherently unnatural and a dangerous lifestyle that could lead to legalized pedophilia and might even destroy the entire democratic system. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Cummer's gavel came down once, lost in the noise. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Years of courtroom authority carried her words. In 2005, you wrote, your race, creed, and sex are what you are, while homosexuality and cross-dressing are things you do. This is a free country, but we don't give special protections for every person's bizarre choices. A young man in the gallery, pride pin glittering on his lapel, had tears running down his cheeks, not of sadness, but of rage. Jasmine's tone dropped, quiet but venomous. But it gets worse. Much worse. She pulled out a binder-clipped section, pages tabbed with color-coded markers. From 2005 to 2010, you promoted an event called the Day of Truth, designed as a counter-protest to the Day of Silence, when students remained quiet to raise awareness about the bullying of LGBTQ youth. Her gaze locked on him. Your event partnered with an organization called Exodus International. Perhaps you remember them, Mr. Speaker. Johnson's jaw clenched so hard his knuckles went white against the table. Exodus International, she said, letting the name hang like poison, was the largest so-called conversion therapy organization in the United States. They claimed they could make gay people straight through prayer and therapy. She flipped another tab. They worked with churches across America to tell LGBTQ youth they were broken. Sinful, wrong, damaged goods that needed fixing. Her voice softened. But every syllable landed like a blade. The organization shut down in 2013. Its founder, Alan Chambers, issued a public apology, admitting that conversion therapy doesn't work, that it was based on junk science, and that they pushed countless young people toward depression, self-harm, and suicide. The room fell utterly silent. Even the press had stopped typing. But in 2006, Jasmine continued, when you were still promoting the Day of Truth with Exodus International, you said this. She held up the quote. We're sharing the truth out of love and compassion. The truth is that homosexuality is morally wrong and physically dangerous. She looked at him unblinking. Love and compassion. Mr. Speaker, is that what you call traumatizing children? Pushing vulnerable young people toward programs that medical science has proven cause harm? Is that your definition of Christian values? Johnson finally found his voice, though it came out rough, uneven. Representative Crockett, those quotes are taken out of context. I was young. My views have evolved. She cut him off with surgical precision. Let's talk about evolution then. Or rather, let's talk about what you said about evolution. A new document slid free from her folder. In 2016, she said evenly, you were already in Congress, representing Louisiana. You gave a sermon, because apparently being a congressman wasn't enough. You also had to be a preacher. And in that sermon you said, mass shootings in America are caused by the teaching of evolution, which promotes a survival of the fittest mentality that devalues human life. Across the table, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dropped her head into her hands. Jasmine didn't stop. In 2015, you posted on your public Facebook that school shootings were caused by abortion and the breakdown of the nuclear family because, and I quote, society is devaluing life. She set the document down with deliberate force. So according to your expert analysis, mass shootings are caused by evolution, abortion, gay people existing, and families that don't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. Her voice lowered, every syllable landing like a hammer, but apparently not by easy access to weapons of war, not by untreated mental health crises, not by hate and radicalization festering online. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about being qualified, experienced, and wise, are those the qualifications you mean? 8 years working for a hate group, partnering with conversion therapy organizations that destroyed young lives, blaming school shootings on science? That's your resume? The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed too loud. Because if so, Jasmine said quietly, I'll take my 5,000 cases defending constitutional rights over your record any day of the week, and twice on Sunday. Johnson's face had gone from red to ash pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Representative, my faith guides everything I do. I'm a Bible-believing Christian. Oh, we're going to talk extensively about your faith. Mr. Speaker, Jasmine's smile returned, but this time it carried the chill of a storm rolling in. We're going to discuss exactly how you've used your faith as a weapon. But first, let's talk about your voting record. Because that pattern of discrimination didn't end when you left the Alliance Defending Freedom, did it? She drew out another thick printout, pages upon pages of congressional votes. Your record tells the same story. Mr. Speaker, the same pattern of hate dressed up as righteousness. Her tone shifted into the steady rhythm of a prosecutor reading from an indictment. Voted against the Equality Act. Voted against the Respect for Marriage Act. Introduced a national Don't Say Gay bill that would have banned any discussion of LGBTQ topics in schools across the country. Led a congressional hearing designed to attack health care for transgender youth, spreading lies and disinformation about medical care. Co-sponsored Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill that would have criminalized gender-affirming care for minors, threatening doctors with up to 25 years in prison. Her voice rose just slightly, and through it all, every single term you've served in Congress, you've earned a 0 on the Human Rights Campaign's congressional scorecard. Not one vote in favor of equality. Not one. She let the word hang before setting the papers down. The Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization, has called you, and I quote, the most anti-equality speaker in United States history. Her voice softened, but the precision cut deeper. The most anti-equality speaker in United States history. Johnson tried again, clinging to his only defense. I'm a Bible-believing Christian. My faith, your faith, Jasmine interrupted, voice hardened to tempered steel, has become your excuse. Let's be clear about what that means in practice. You've used faith as a weapon to criminalize love. You've used faith to strip away civil rights. You've used faith to traumatize children. You've used faith to justify partnering with organizations that drove young people toward despair and death. She leaned forward, both hands flat on the table. That's not faith. Mr. Speaker, that's hate in a suit. And when hate puts on a suit and calls itself righteousness, That's you. The explosion was immediate. Phones, whispers, camera shutters, it all blended into a rising storm. The moment was going viral in real time, but Jasmine wasn't finished. Now, she said, voice cooling again, let's talk about what you did when democracy itself was on the line. She opened another folder, this one stamped with official congressional seals, court filings and email printouts. December 2020, she began. The presidential election had been called. Joe Biden had won. The votes were certified. Republican officials in multiple states had confirmed the results. 60 courts, including the Supreme Court, had rejected claims of fraud. The Justice Department, under Trump's own Attorney General Bill Barr, found no evidence of widespread fraud. She lifted a printed email, holding it high. And then there's you, Mr. Speaker Mike Johnson, constitutional lawyer, supposed defender of law and order. She began reading, voice dripping with restrained contempt. President Trump called me this morning to let me know how much he appreciates the amicus brief we are filing on behalf of members of Congress. Indeed, this is the big one. The way she delivered that last line, mocking his tone, savoring the phrase, the big one, drew actual gasps from the gallery. You led 126 House Republicans, she continued, to sign onto a brief supporting a lawsuit filed by the Texas Attorney General, asking the Supreme Court to throw out the election results in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. She set the email down and lifted the legal brief itself, thick and heavy. 4 states. Millions of votes. You wanted them invalidated, thrown out, democracy erased. She flipped through pages. And why? Not because of evidence, your own brief couldn't claim that. No, you hung your argument on a procedural technicality, claiming pandemic-related voting changes were unconstitutional because state legislatures hadn't approved them. She looked up, stare sharp as glass. You know what's interesting about that argument, Mr. Speaker? You're a constitutional lawyer. You knew states have broad authority to conduct their elections. You knew Texas had no standing to sue other states. You knew the Supreme Court would reject it. She dropped another document onto the table with a sharp thud, which they did, unanimously. One of the shortest Supreme Court decisions in modern history. Texas has not demonstrated a judicially recognizable interest in the manner in which another state conducts its elections. She leaned forward, but you filed it anyway. You rallied 126 members of Congress behind what you knew was a lie. You made it about loyalty to one man over loyalty to the Constitution, over loyalty to democracy itself. The air in the room was charged. Still dangerous. And then, Jasmine continued, January 6th happened. The words themselves shifted the temperature. Domestic terrorists attacked this capital. They attacked police officers, injured 140 of them. They hunted for the Vice President of the United States, built a gallows outside and chanted for his death. They tried to overturn an election through violence and terror. Her voice softened, but the restraint made it stronger. And hours later, after the blood was cleaned up, the windows boarded, and the bodies counted, you came back into this chamber and still voted to overturn the election results in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Johnson opened his mouth. Representative, many members had legitimate concerns about. You had concerns, Jasmine repeated, standing fully upright now, fury in her posture unmistakable. I've had concerns about elections too, Mr. Speaker. Back in Texas, when Republicans passed voter suppression laws to make it harder for black and brown people to vote, you know what I did with those concerns? I worked within the system. I filed legislation. I organized. I built coalitions. I walked out with 62 colleagues to deny a quorum, a completely legitimate legislative tactic used throughout American history. Her voice rose, resonating through the room. I didn't try to end democracy, Mr. Speaker. I didn't spread conspiracy theories about dead Venezuelan dictators rigging voting machines. I didn't give aid and comfort to insurrectionists who wanted to hang the vice president. She pulled out another sheet, a radio transcript. Oh yes, let's talk about Hugo Chavez. November 17th, 2020, you went on a Louisiana radio show and said, and I quote, "There's merit to allegations about voting machines being rigged with software from Hugo Chavez. Venezuela." Her tone turned razor sharp. Hugo Chavez died in 2013. Mr. Speaker, he'd been dead 7 years. Yet you went on the air and told your voters his ghost was rigging elections from beyond the grave. A strangled laugh escaped someone in the gallery. a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. You promoted Sidney Powell's fantasies, Rudy Giuliani's drunken lies, QAnon conspiracies. You wrapped them all in constitutional language and called it faith. She gathered the papers neatly, tapping the stack against the table. So when you talk about qualifications, experience, and wisdom, be clear. You tried to end democracy in this country. You led 126 members of Congress in an attempt to overturn a free and fair election. You spread lies you knew were lies. And when your coup attempt failed and the violence came, you still voted to disenfranchise millions of Americans. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, but somehow filled the entire chamber. I defended constitutional rights for 5,000 clients. You tried to destroy them for 330 million Americans. A pause. Then, with the soft finality of a verdict, we are not the same. The eruption was instantaneous. Democrats stood cheering. Republicans shouted objections. The gallery roared. Comer's gavel pounded again and again, meaningless against the noise. But Jasmine stayed perfectly still, calm amid the storm, waiting for silence. When the noise finally began to fade, she waited. She didn't raise her voice, didn't smile. She simply said, "But let's discuss your personal life, Mr. Speaker, because we need to talk about your relationship with accountability." The shift in tone was immediate. The air tightened again. Johnson's face, which had started to recover color, went pale. 2022, she began, voice low but steady. Iris Baptist Church, Benton, Louisiana. You gave a speech about technology, what you called the war on technology. In that speech, you discussed a program called Covenant Eyes. Do you remember that, Mr. Speaker? Johnson swallowed. I give many speeches. This was a very specific speech, Jasmine said, about Internet accountability software. She picked up a printed transcript and began to read, tone precise, clinical, like reciting evidence before a jury. Covenant Eyes is software that takes screenshots of everything you view on your electronic devices, every minute of every day. Every website, every image, every search term. It uses artificial intelligence to scan for what it deems objectionable content, then sends detailed reports to an accountability partner of your choosing. She looked up. And your accountability partner, Mr. Speaker, the person who receives those reports, is your 17-year-old son, Jack. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Jasmine continued, still calm. You and your teenage son monitor each other's internet activity. He receives reports about what you view online. You receive reports about what he views. Each of you gets notified if the software detects anything inappropriate. Johnson's voice came out strained. It's taken out of context. It's about accountability, about the Christian faith tradition. It's about control, Mr. Speaker. Her tone cut like glass. The same control you've tried to exert over LGBTQ people's lives for decades. The same control you want over women's reproductive choices. The same control you sought over whose votes should count. She stepped closer to the microphone, eyes locked on him. Control is the through line of your entire career. From her folder, she pulled another set of documents. But what makes this especially rich in hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker, is this. You need surveillance software to monitor your own behavior online. You need your teenage son to hold you accountable for your relationship with pornography. A few audible groans came from the gallery. And yet, Jasmine continued, voice steady but razor sharp. You spent 8 years at the Alliance Defending Freedom arguing that other people's private sexual behavior should be criminalized. You called gay people dangerous and unnatural. You wrote briefs defending laws that made private consensual sex a crime. You built your career on policing the intimate lives of others. She took a breath. But your own relationship with sexuality is so dysfunctional that you need invasive software watching every click and your son reviewing it. Republican committee member closed his eyes and shook his head. And there's another layer to this, Jasmine said, voice now measured again, almost gentle but far more dangerous. A national security layer that caught even the press off guard. You're the Speaker of the House, she continued. Second in line to the presidency. You have access to classified information, sensitive communications. Yet you told that church audience that you've installed this third-party software on all your devices. All of them. Software that takes screenshots every minute and uploads them to external servers. A murmur rippled through the Republican side. Someone from the Intelligence Committee visibly stiffened. "Now, Mr. Speaker," Jasmine said, tone surgical. "Who has access to those screenshots? Covenant Eyes says they delete data after 30 days. But your passwords, your login credentials, your browsing history, all of it passes through their servers. Your teenage son sees it. Their employees see it. Who else might be seeing it?" She let the question hang, heavy and electric. "You've spent your career obsessively trying to control other people's private behavior," she said quietly, "while you can't even control your own without surveillance software and your child watching over your shoulder." She straightened. The hypocrisy is staggering. "It's almost incomprehensible." Johnson was sweating now. "This is inappropriate." "My family." "You made it public," Jasmine interrupted, tone unflinching. "You brought it into your sermon. You distributed it online. I'm just making sure the American people understand the staggering hypocrisy of a man who's policed everyone else's sexuality while needing his son to monitor his own." She took a breath and set the folder aside. "But now," she said, "we need to discuss your actions as Speaker, because the American people deserve to know why you're blocking an elected representative from taking her oath of office." Gasps again. Cameras zoomed closer. Jasmine lifted another folder. This, one filled with court filings and letters. September 23, 2024. Adelita. Grijalva wins a special election in Arizona to represent the state's 7th congressional district. She wins decisively. She is the duly elected representative of the people of Arizona. She held up a certification document, voice cool and clear. "And you, Mr. Speaker?" Refused to swear her in. Johnson shifted in his seat. The House was out of session when, "Let's talk about your excuses," Jasmine cut in. "You said it was about precedent, about the House being out of session, about following Pelosi's rules. But the Arizona Attorney General has now sued you. Mr. Speaker, constitutional law scholars, including conservative ones, have called your actions unprecedented and illegal. Even members of your own party have said you're violating the Constitution." She set the lawsuit down and picked up another sheet. Representative Grijalva herself said something interesting. She said, and I quote, "Maybe, just maybe, he's blocking me because if I were sworn in, I'd be the 218th signature on a discharge petition." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Do you know what that petition is about, Mr. Speaker?" Johnson's hands trembled. He didn't answer. "It's a petition," Jasmine said softly, "to force a vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files." "All of them? The full unredacted documentation of everyone connected to Epstein's child sex trafficking operation, the flight logs, the communications, the photos, the financials." Her voice was calm, but each word struck like a bell. "And you've been fighting this release with everything you have, haven't you, Mr. Speaker?" Johnson's reply came out strangled. "The president wants the files released properly, through appropriate channels, with protections for the victims. You're not protecting victims, Mr. Speaker." Jasmine's tone sliced through his defense like a blade. "In July, when pressure built for a vote on the Epstein files, you shut down the House early. You sent everyone home 3 days before recess. You lost control of your own Rules Committee rather than allow the bill to proceed." She lifted news clippings one by one. "You're keeping the House in recess. You're blocking Representative Grijalva from being seated. You're obstructing a bipartisan investigation." Her voice dropped lower. "And you're doing it while certain allegations swirl around you." The pause was infinite. "There are allegations, Mr. Speaker," she said quietly. "A TikTok user with a substantial following claims to have found your name in certain databases, certain apps used for discrete hookups. The color drained from Johnson's face. These are baseless conspiracy theories," he barked. "You promoted conspiracy theories about dead Venezuelan dictators rigging elections," Jasmine shot back. "You amplified QAnon lies. You spread false claims of voter fraud after 60 courts said there was none. But when questions arise about your conduct, suddenly conspiracy theories are beneath you." She stepped closer, tone steady, prosecutorial. "Let's lay out the pattern. Mr. Speaker, you spent your career at the Alliance Defending Freedom calling LGBTQ people deviant. You said gay relationships would lead to pedophilia. You wrote that homosexuality was a dangerous lifestyle that threatened children. You built your career on attacking other people's private lives, claiming you were protecting children." Her voice rose, full of righteous fury. And now you're fighting to keep sealed the files that could expose actual exploitation of children by powerful men. You're blocking votes. You're refusing to seat an elected representative. You're hiding from accountability. She paused, tone softening only slightly. The hypocrisy is so profound, so staggering, that it defies comprehension. You spent decades calling others predators, while possibly protecting actual predators, possibly being one yourself. That's enough. Johnson shouted, half rising from his seat. No, Mr. Speaker, Jasmine said calmly. It's not nearly enough. Because now we need to talk about how you spend campaign money. She opened another folder, spreading FEC filings across the table like cards in a trial. Since March 2024, she began. Your campaign has paid $12,500 in rent to a company called Green Properties, owned by Representative Darrell Issa of California. Johnson looked like he wanted to vanish. You claim it's for campaign office space, Jasmine said. But here's what's interesting. In your entire career, your campaign has reported 2 other rent payments, both in your district in Shreveport, Louisiana. But suddenly, in March 2024, the exact month ProPublica reported that you've been living in a multi-million-dollar townhouse on Capitol Hill owned by a major GOP donor. Your campaign starts paying rent to a colleague's company. She placed the documents neatly in front of her. The Campaign Legal Center has filed ethics complaints pointing out that using campaign funds to pay for your personal residence is illegal. But you did it anyway. Because, Mr. Speaker, you've always believed the rules don't apply to you. Her voice began to build again. Just like you believed the rules about overturning elections didn't apply to you. Just like you believed the ethics rules about working for hate groups didn't apply to you. Just like you believe the Constitution itself doesn't apply when it gets in your way. She reached for one last folder. Recent news clippings. And then there's the government shutdown. Millions of Americans affected. Federal workers going without paychecks. Food assistance programs running dry. Air traffic controllers working without pay. She looked directly at Johnson. And where were you, Mr. Speaker? He didn't respond. She didn't wait. You kept the House out of session. You refused to call members back. Marjorie Taylor Greene called you out on a private conference call, and even she rarely criticizes fellow Republicans. Other members of your own party demanded you bring Congress back to work. Jasmine picked up a printed quote, reading it with deliberate care. And you said, and I quote, "The shutdown pain is about to rise to level 10. She set the page down. You knew people were suffering. You knew federal workers were missing mortgage payments. You knew families were skipping meals. And you kept the House closed anyway. Why? Because coming back meant votes. You wanted to avoid Epstein files, budget negotiations, accountability. Her tone hardened, words hitting like steady blows. And through all of it, Mr. Speaker, you used the same excuse over and over again. Your favorite deflection. Your go-to dodge whenever uncomfortable questions arise. She began listing them, each line growing sharper. I haven't seen that report about Trump's crypto dealings. I haven't seen that ProPublica investigation about detained children. I haven't seen the news about the January 6th rioter Trump pardoned who threatened to kill Hakeem Jeffries. I haven't seen the article about Trump demanding $230 million from the Justice Department as a settlement. Her voice rose, rhythmic now, each word hammering the air. You haven't seen anything. Mr. Speaker, you're the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, second in line to the presidency. And you somehow miss every major story that might require you to show a spine. She leaned forward, eyes unyielding. You're not a leader. Mr. Speaker, you're an ostrich with its head buried in the sand. Except you're not just hiding from reality. You're burying our democracy right along with you. The room had gone silent again. You could hear the faint hum of the cameras, the sound of breathing, the scribble of a single reporter's pen. Jasmine began stacking her folders, neatly aligning each corner with precision. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. When she looked up again, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Let me bring this all together, Mr. Speaker, she said quietly, because the American people deserve to see the complete picture of who you are. She straightened to her full height. You claim moral authority. You present yourself as a man of faith, of family values, of biblical principle, of constitutional duty. Her tone shifted, measured, cold, surgical. But the receipts, she said, the documented facts of your life and career, tell a very different story. She held up a finger. Family values. You need pornography surveillance software shared with your teenage son to control your own impulses. That's not family values, Mr. Speaker. That's dysfunction dressed up as virtue. A second finger. Biblical principles? You spent 8 years with a hate group using the Bible to justify discrimination. You partnered with organizations that drove LGBTQ youth to despair and death, all in the name of love and compassion. That's not biblical principle. That's blasphemy. A third finger. Law and order? You led 126 members of Congress in an attempt to overthrow a legitimate election. You spread conspiracy theories you knew were false. You voted to overturn democracy after terrorists attacked this Capitol. That's not law and order. That's insurrection. A fourth finger. Constitutional duty. You're violating it right now by refusing to seat a duly elected representative. You're obstructing investigations. You're hiding from votes. You're abusing power to protect yourself and your allies. That's not constitutional duty. That's tyranny in a cheap suit. She lowered her hand and planted both palms on the table. This has never been about faith or family or law or order. This has always been about one thing: control. Her voice built, each word deliberate, resonant. Control over LGBTQ people's lives, who they can love, who they can marry, whether they can even exist in public. Control over women's bodies, their choices, their autonomy, their dignity. Control over who gets to vote, suppressing the franchise, overturning elections, deciding which votes count. Control over what information gets released, blocking Epstein files, hiding from oversight, burying the truth. And control over your own desires, so obsessive that you need software and your child to watch you. She straightened again, voice rising to a crescendo. You've spent your career persecuting others for their private lives while you can't even trust yourself unsupervised. You've called others dangerous and deviant while aligning yourself with groups that cause documented psychological harm to children. You've questioned my qualifications while your own career was built on losing legal cases for a hate group. Her voice grew stronger, fuller, filling the room. And when American democracy called on you to honor your oath, when the Constitution you claimed to love asked you to do your basic duty, you chose insurrection over integrity. You chose loyalty to one man over loyalty to millions of voters. You chose conspiracy over country. She gathered the 5 folders, holding them against her chest like evidence at the close of a trial. Now, as Speaker, you continue the same pattern, blocking votes, fearing oversight, claiming ignorance as a defense, using campaign funds for personal gain, serving Trump over America, protecting yourself instead of protecting the people. She paused, letting the words settle into every corner of the room. Mr. Speaker, she said, voice almost gentle now, you came here this morning to question my qualifications, to suggest that I was elevated through quotas instead of merit, to imply that a young black woman doesn't belong in these halls. Her tone sharpened again, soft but unstoppable. But I've defended 5,000 people's constitutional rights. You've spent your career trying to strip them away. I've fought for democracy. You fought against it. I've protected the vulnerable. You've exploited them. She locked eyes with him. I know exactly what you are. Mr. Speaker, the pause was endless. You're what happens when hate puts on a suit and calls itself righteousness, when hypocrisy claims the moral high ground, when a man so desperate to control everyone else can't even control himself without his son watching. Her voice grew softer still, but somehow carried even more weight. You're what happens when someone, so sure of his own virtue, leaves nothing behind but wreckage and destroyed lives. The final words built like a storm breaking. You've spent decades calling others deviant while hiding evidence of actual crimes against children. You've preached family values while needing porn surveillance. You've claimed constitutional duty while attempting a coup. You've demanded respect for this institution while trying to burn it down. She took a breath, slow, steady. And the saddest part, she said, is that you genuinely believe you're doing God's work. You think you're a righteous man being persecuted for your faith. She shook her head slowly. But history will remember you as the speaker who chose insurrection over democracy, hate over love, power over principle, control over freedom, and self-preservation over truth. Then she closed the final folder with a single sharp motion. The sound was like a gavel strike. Final. Absolute. She looked toward Chairman Comer. Mr. Chairman, she said evenly, the speaker can have my remaining time. Then came that small, devastating smile. I'm sure he has a lot to explain to his accountability partner, if no one else. The room detonated. Democrats rose to their feet, applauding through tears. Republicans sat frozen, some shouting objections, others staring down at their hands. The gallery exploded into chaos. Cheers, gasps, the sound of 100 phones recording the moment. Security moved toward the doors. Comer's gavel slammed repeatedly, utterly drowned out by the roar. Johnson tried to stand, gripping the microphone so tightly his knuckles went white. These are attacks on Christian faith. No, Mr. Speaker. Jasmine's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of a courtroom veteran. You're not being persecuted for your faith. You're being held accountable for your actions. There's a difference. She gathered her folders under her arm and turned to leave, calm amid the noise. As she passed the witness table, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rose first and began to clap. Then Hakeem Jeffries. Then Jamie Raskin. Within seconds, every Democrat in the room was standing, applause rolling like thunder. Jasmine Crockett walked through it with her head high, her purple blazer gleaming beneath the lights. The gallery parted for her like water. Most Republicans couldn't meet her eyes, except for Thomas Massey, who gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. A quiet gesture of respect from one person who'd stood up to his own leadership to another. The heavy doors closed behind her with a decisive thud. But the chaos continued inside. Outside, the hallway exploded with reporters. Representative Crockett, can you comment? What do you say to those who? Will you be filing ethics complaints? Microphones thrust forward. Cameras jostled for space. The air buzzed with noise. Jasmine lifted a hand. Miraculously, the noise dropped just enough for her to speak. I'll give you one statement, she said, voice clear, steady, unwavering. This wasn't personal. This was necessary. She looked straight into the nearest camera. As a public defender, I learned to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. Today I spoke for LGBTQ youth who were targeted by so-called conversion therapy organizations. I spoke for voters whose rights were nearly stolen by an attempted coup. I spoke for every American who's ever been told they don't belong in places they've earned the right to stand. For everyone dismissed as a token or a quota. For everyone whose qualifications have been questioned by someone whose own record can't survive scrutiny. She paused, that small, sharp smile returning. The receipts don't lie. They never do. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. Her staffers hurrying to keep pace. Behind her, the chaos raged on. But she didn't look back.